Good afternoon and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Angelica Spanos. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have two live trials that we're going to be following today and a hearing that we'll keep you updated on. Robert Durst is back in the spotlight. He has a pre-trial hearing in California today. Prosecutors in California say the millionaire real estate heir killed his longtime friend Susan Berman because he wanted to silence her. They say she knew Durst killed his own wife decades earlier. We'll be monitoring and following this pre-trial hearing, but we will not be live in the courtroom. We'll bring you updates when we have them. The trial is scheduled for February. And we're expecting opening statements in the trial of Ramon Bueno today. He's the man that shot police trooper James Casey during a traffic stop. Casey stopped a car for a window tint that was possibly illegal, and there were 5 people in the car, including Bueno. And while Casey was questioning the occupants, Bueno shot Casey in the left cheek with a .357 Magnum revolver from the back seat. Casey survived and is expected to testify in the trial. Americans know Casey through the hit show Live PD, hosted by our founder Dan Abrams and broadcast on A&E, which owns a portion of the Law and Crime Network. And today, our big trial of Mark Sievers. Today is day 8 of that trial in Florida. The defense started its case for Sievers. The state rested yesterday, and we are expecting to see about 5 more witnesses, including Curtis Wainwright, take the stand. Sievers is the man accused of hiring 2 men to kill his wife, Dr. Teresa Sievers, in their home. Teresa was found by a colleague beaten to death with a hammer. You'll recall Jimmy Rogers, one of the other men involved, was convicted of second-degree murder for his role in this attack. And the third man involved, Curtis Wainwright, agreed to a plea deal in exchange to testify against Sievers and Rogers. That trial is on a lunch break right now. Jimmy Rogers' girlfriend, Taylor Showmaker, a key witness in this trial, testified yesterday. So we're going to go back and listen to some of her testimony talking about Jimmy Rogers' involvement in the case. All right, so that is Taylor Showmaker. She's the former girlfriend of Jimmy Rogers, and we heard from her in his trial as well. But basically, she was just talking about getting rid of some evidence that was used, and she talked about what Jimmy had told her about this and exactly any details she knew. She also talked about clothing that was worn that she ended up getting rid of. So I'm going to introduce my guest today. Right now, we have Michael Hilferty, attorney, as well as Joseph Tully, trial attorney. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Angela.
Let's first talk about Taylor here. She was a witness in Jimmy Rogers' trial, and we're listening to her again in this trial. She ended up being very important in his trial and is another key witness in this trial as well, as she talks about the relationship between them, how these men were connected. Do you think she's a key witness here in connecting Sievers to the other 2 men, which of course is the defendant here and who we need to know the connection for this trial?
Without a doubt. I mean, you have someone who essentially, it's his girlfriend. It's Roger's girlfriend. Who better would know his, his key ally, so to speak. And you have her testifying to essentially a contemporaneous statement on Roger's behalf as to what he was doing and how they were doing it. So I think so long as she gives consistent testimony between the 2 trials, which obviously the defense is going to try and poke holes into, so long as she gives that consistent testimony, she's going to be very important to the prosecution.
All right, thank you, Michael. And Joseph, I'll come out to you now. Do you find Showmaker believable here? Some say that she does have a motive here. It's possibly the fact that she, does she have a motive for lying? And then also in her cross, we did see that there were some discrepancies with her testimony.
Well, a good cross-examination can always bring out some discrepancy. The real question is, what kind of discrepancies are they? Are they major? Are they minor? Did she say something was red one time, then orange the next time, versus, black one time versus white the next time? There's major discrepancies and minor discrepancies. But I think she's a critical witness that links the defendant to the crime here. And she's not only the girlfriend, but she's somebody who observed part of the cover-up of the crime afterwards.
Right, absolutely. All right, Joseph, thank you. We're going to go back to listening to more of the testimony from Showmaker. Let's listen. All right, so that was Showmaker's really only mention about Mark Sievers in this trial. However, in Jimmy Rogers' trial, she did talk a bit more about him. We're going to go back to Jimmy Rogers' trial and show you what she said in that trial. All right, so you can see she was a bit more specific about Mark's involvement in that testimony. Let's talk more about Taylor Showmaker here. One of the things we know is that, and we know this because the defense pointed out in their cross-examination, but Taylor Showmaker was getting paid $400 per month from the Lee County Sheriff's Office to basically participate in this. And this was going over 4 years. She also testified that she said that she was threatened by police during the investigation, and she thought that if she didn't cooperate, she could possibly lose her children. Joseph, I'll come out to you first. Have you heard of a witness getting paid like this? And if so, how does that play in here?
I've heard it's actually a common practice with law enforcement to do that. Not super common, but it does occur. And what I think it does is it gives unnecessarily the defense in a case the ability to bring up one more issue in terms of credibility. I mean, every witness has to come to court and testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If they're subpoenaed, why not just leave it at that? To not do so, I think, opens up the prosecution to some unnecessary, holes in their case.
Right. And Michael, do you think that, as Joseph said, that this does affect her credibility?
Oh, 100%. I mean, anytime you have a witness on the stand, you cross-examine them for conflicts of interest. And whether it's a doctor in a personal injury case who's getting paid $10,000 a day to testify, or a witness like this who's receiving money directly from the state agency that is prosecuting, in this case, Mr. Rogers at the time, and today, Mr. Wright, obviously you have to question her motivations for doing so. I mean, you see how she's testifying. She's not a very energetic or forthcoming witness. It almost sounds like they're pulling teeth. And that could be a factor of herself or just her personality, or it could be the fact that she's frightened for her safety. And you have to wonder, how this money plays into her motivations.
And one of the things I also want to bring up, we didn't play you this clip, but during her testimony, Showmaker said that the hammer she saw was a different type of hammer than the one that Curtis Wainwright said that he used. Do you think that this is something that the prosecution was able or should just kind of gloss over? Do you think that it will come down to this hammer thing?
I don't. Any kind of trial like this where you have multiple witnesses who have each have their own perspective, there's going to be differences in the facts. And that's why the burden of proof is never 100%. It's beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case. So in something like this, I think they have to address it, certainly. But look, she wasn't there supposedly when the murder took place. She did help dispose of the evidence, but she necessarily didn't see what exactly was used. And again, you see how she's testifying. She may not remember or recall everything herself.
Right, especially specific details about a type of hammer
that she didn't herself use or even see used in a crime.
All right, thank you, Michael Joseph. We have to take a first break right now on Law and Crime. Plenty more when we come back. Stay with us here. And welcome back to Law and Crime. We're following Mark Sievers' trial right now, which is on a lunch break. The state rested its case, and the defense will continue to call its witnesses today. When they're back from that break, we will go there live. Meantime, we're going to play testimony from victim Dr. Teresa Sievers' friend who testified yesterday, Danielle Baradrelli. She was a childhood friend of Teresa's. Let's listen.
Late the night of the 30th, going into the early morning hours of the 1st, did you actually have contact with Mr. Sievers at any point?
He did come to the room later that night to see me.
The room you were sharing with Miss Lisa?
Yes.
And now, how did he get to the room? Did he call the room and you went down and got him and brought him up, or did he come to your door?
No, he came to the door.
And he knocked on the door and you let him in?
He did.
What happened when he arrived at the room?
We hugged immediately, and then he sounded as though he were crying.
Now you're making a distinction there that you said he sounded like he was crying.
I say that because he sounded like he was crying and his body was quaking like he was crying, but when we looked at each other, I was searching his face and there were no tears, no red eyes, no runny nose. Not like my face or Anne's face or her brother's faces. I did, and I was taken aback because, I thought our first words would be about the void that Teresa was going to leave as a mother and as a wife and as a friend, and or like the who or the why, the how. But instead, we had a conversation about who was going to take care of the children in the event that he could not. And then we talked about the life insurance policy.
Did Mr. Seavers tell you at that point that he had some kind of terminal illness or something that would prevent him from being able to care for his daughters?
No.
But he was concerned he wouldn't be around.
Yes, and I was very confused by that and told him so.
Then you said the very next topic was life insurance. Did the life insurance come up in reference to the girls, or did it come up for some other reason?
No, so after he talked about somebody taking care of the girls, he literally dropped to his knees at the foot of the bed and he started talking about money and the fact that he was very concerned about how he was going to make money to raise the girls financially. And he said that he didn't have a job, he hadn't worked for anyone in years. He thought maybe he could go back to nursing at some point and get recertified, but that would be a lot of time away from the girls. And he was looking at me like for the answer because I had the answer. I knew what the answer was. And I said to him at that time, Mark, when you asked me to be guardian of the girls, you told me that there was a very large life insurance policy. You told me that the girls would be very well taken care of. And he immediately had a look of relief on his face, and he put his head in his hands and he said, "Oh, I totally forgot."
All right, so listening to Teresa's childhood friend, Danielle, talk about Mark's behavior right after the murder. Basically, when she knew that Teresa was murdered, she immediately flew down to Florida, and she said that Mark came to see her at a hotel, and one of the things she said was that he appeared as though he was crying, but when she looked at him, his eyes weren't red or watering. So, Joseph, I'll come out to you first. Odd behavior, though, if you think about it. A little convenient, if you will, that he wasn't really upset after this, huh?
Yeah, odd behavior if he's actually innocent of this, and consistent behavior if he's guilty of it. So this is very damning testimony by a very important witness in this case.
All right. And another thing she said was, she talked and discussed with Mark about who would take care of the daughters, of the girls, if something were to happen to him. And she said straight up that she was confused by that and why he was saying that. What is that showing there?
That's showing that he wants to put the onus of the substantial life insurance policy on somebody else. He wanted it to come from somebody else, from her specifically, and then to have him be able to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot all about life insurance policy. That was the last thing on my mind in this instance," when the evidence indicates that it was probably the first thing on his mind.
Right. And Michael, about that life insurance, he says that that was one of the things that he talked to her about right afterwards. She said he started talking about the life insurance, and she said that Mark was very concerned about how he was going to be able to make money to raise these girls. So, and Danielle said it was weird that he didn't remember that he told her about this large life insurance policy. Again, odd behavior.
It's the guy's sort of a goon, you know. It's like he watched a murder movie and is going through all the steps that he thinks someone who is playing innocent or is actually innocent has to go through. He's faking crying. He's talking about, you know, who's going to raise the kids. I don't think, you know, he knows this woman is their guardian. I think he was planning to take his share of the money and run, obviously. And, you know, he's going through the steps, and anyone who allegedly commits a murder, you know, they never think they're going to get caught. And in this instance, I think he's going through the steps to establish his innocence, and he's just not smart enough to pull it off.
Do you think at this point he thought he was going to get caught?
No, I don't think so at all. And that's why he's going through these motions. You know, you have some people who I think, you know, when the trap is closing in around them, they do a lot of desperate things. I don't think he realizes that he's even a suspect at this point.
He didn't really panic. He kind of played cool and, as you said, almost was coached on what to do.
Well, the fake crying that he wasn't crying, you know, the quivering, the getting on his knees and all of that. I mean, it's something that I don't think normal people would do. And if he was in as much grief as he claimed to have been, I think it would have hit him a lot harder than he was acting, you know, he was acting it to be.
Right. All right. We're going to play one more piece of the testimony from Danielle. Let's watch. All right, so more from Danielle. Another thing she mentioned during her testimony was that she said Mark was more upset with police than he was with Curtis Wainwright or Jimmy Rogers. This is, of course, after he knew that they were implicated here. She also said that Mark thought police were not going to be able to find the real murderers and that they were going to take the easy way out and pin it on him. So very interesting things we learned from Teresa's friend Danielle, a very key witness, as we discussed here. We have to take a break right now on Law and Crime. When we come back, we'll have another friend of Dr. Teresa Sievers, Dr. Bethany Mitchell, on the stand. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law and Crime. We're still following Mark Sievers' trial right now. The prosecution finished calling its witnesses yesterday, and we heard from very important witnesses giving us some new details. We're going to listen to Dr. Bethany Mitchell right now. She's another friend of Teresa who testified about Mark's odd behavior right after the murder. All right, so more from Teresa's friend here, who basically says that after Teresa's murder, she talked with Mark. She said that he also talked about who would take care of the daughters if something happened to him. She said that Mark sounded panicked and was worried that he would be arrested next. This is after they talked about why Curtis Wainwright was arrested for the murder. So sort of giving us some more details that we got from the last witness we heard from. Joseph Tully, I'll come out to you. What's the importance of this witness here?
Again, it's a neutral witness who knew the victim, the defendant, and one of the other accused here. At least she had met him, and she connects everything together. So when the police arrest the friend of the defendant, a lifelong friend, she's able to connect how the husband on trial reacted. What were his emotions like? Was he angry that someone that he knew, a friend, killed his wife? Or did he defend him? And here we have the answer. He defended him and tried to distance this person from the actual murder.
Right, absolutely. And one of the interesting things about this was that she said that Mark was apparently more upset with the law enforcement than he was with the person who was being accused of killing his wife. So, Michael, when we hear that, and again, it's sort of what we heard with the last witness, Danielle, what does that say about him? Well,
I think it's another classic psychological move when the focus of the investigation is being placed on you. You attack the process. You know, you see even President Trump doing that now, rather than speak to the merits of what he's being accused of. He accuses the process. So here you have Sievers, not being accused, but his best friend being accused of murdering the wife. He goes after the police. It can't possibly be him. He loved her. He was so grateful for her, for everything she did for him. It's got to be the crooked, corrupt police going.
Right. I'm getting framed. We're getting framed.
Absolutely.
Whatever he said. All right. Thank you, Michael. Joseph. We've got to take a break right now on Law and Crime. When we come back, we'll still be following Mark Sievers' trial. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law and Crime. We have more from Dr. Bethany Mitchell that we want to play for you. She testified that she actually caught Mark Sievers in a lie. This is a very interesting piece of her testimony. Let's listen. All right, so basically, Mark tells Bethany that he didn't even know Jimmy Rogers, but she ended up finding a picture of them together at Curtis Wainwright's wedding. So this is pretty big because he denies knowing him. He says he never even had heard of him, but of course, we know that's not the case. Joseph, I'll come out to you first. This is kind of bad news here for Mark Sievers, right?
Exactly. This would be the definition of bombshell evidence against a defendant on trial, where there's evidence that he has a close relationship with yet another person who's involved in the murder of his wife, and he outright denies it rather than, having some kind of admission and an explanation.
And so far through this case, really the prosecution has put on a very strong argument here. And the defense obviously starting to call their witnesses today. They have more on the list that they're going to bring forward. But is this going to be a real uphill battle for the defense, do you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, look at this case on its face. You have a husband who was having marital problems, who didn't have a job, who had a large insurance policy on his wife, and then two of his good friends involved in her murder. On its face, the crux of the suspicion is going to fall on him, and doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence coming out that can go against that at all.
All right, Joseph, thank you. Michael, I'll ask you the same question. Basically, from what we've heard in the prosecution's case, they've kind of really tied that relationship between Sievers and these men together, in my opinion, and have painted him out to be kind of the mastermind here, the person who planned this out. Do you agree with that? I
mean, I agree. It's hard to believe that this guy could be a mastermind of anything based on how this has come out. But yes, I mean, I think in addition to everything in this trial, you also have other types of evidence in the form of sworn testimony and evidence in an entire another trial, Rogers. In addition, you have the cooperating witness of the guy who allegedly performed the actual murder. So yes, I think absolutely he has an uphill battle.
All right, Michael, Joseph, thank you so much. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about that hammer and the discrepancy between what Curtis Wainwright said, what type of hammer was used, versus what Taylor Showmaker said, what type of hammer was used after this. Welcome back to Law and Crime. We are still breaking down Mark Sievers' trial right now. And right now we're going to focus on the hammer that was used. During his testimony, Curtis Wainwright Jr. claims that Jimmy Rogers' hammer was a claw hammer. However, when we heard from Taylor Showmaker, she said it was a different type of hammer that was used. Let's listen to what Curtis says about what type of hammer he believes was used. All right, so that's Curtis Wainwright saying, yeah, we used a claw hammer there. Let's now listen to what Taylor Showmaker says, because she testified that Jimmy Rogers used and brought back from the Sievers' house a ball-peen hammer. All right, so that was Taylor talking about what she thought the type of hammer which was used, which she said had a ball on each end. Michael here is going to help me explain these hammers and the types of hammers. So tell us what a claw hammer is versus the ball-peen.
So whenever you think of a hammer, I think most people, you see people building something, carpentry with wood, that's a claw hammer. It has the head on the one side that you hit the nail with, and then on the other end there's two prongs that's the claw part of a hammer that you would use to pull out nails usually. Ball-peen hammer is usually smaller. It's got a rounded ball for the head, and the other side can have either, in this instance, she testifies that it's another ball. It could also have a sort of modified claw that's flat, but you typically not use, for prying out nails necessarily.
So is this discrepancy on the hammer critical to the state's case?
I mean, no one has said that there were more than one hammer. So there could have been two hammers. It's not necessarily inconsistent because the Wainwright said that it was. He testified that Rogers went back and hit her again with the claw part of the hammer. there could be a claw part of the hammer on a ball peen hammer. It's not necessarily specific enough, I think, to be completely inconsistent.
All right, and Joseph, I'll come to you real quick. We know that the medical examiner had said that there was no way to tell how many hammers were used. So now that we know that, Curtis is saying it was a claw hammer, and then that there could be this ball and peen hammer, but also we don't know how many hammers were even in that house at the time. What does this mean here?
I think it means very little. A lot of times, juries want the big facts of the case. The big facts of the case are that that the wife was killed with a hammer. It could have been one, it could have been two, it could have been a regular hammer, it could have been a ball peen hammer. But whether or not, it was a ball peen hammer, a regular hammer, or a claw hammer, it doesn't dispel any of the guilt of the people who used a hammer to kill somebody.
Right, and I think that's the main part here, as Michael said. This is still not necessarily something that's going to affect the prosecution's case here, right?
Exactly. It's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not proof to 100% or proof beyond all doubt. Again, here, the big picture.
Joseph, I got to cut you off right now. I'm sorry. We have to take this break. When we come back, we'll continue to follow Mark Sievers' trial. Stay with us here.